So a buddy of mine over at True Edge Kennels made a request that I do a video on tips for cold weather, and given the fact that we had a blizzard this weekend, I thought this would be about as good a time as any. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind in regards to snowstorms, rainstorms, that kind of thing. And the first thing I'd say is pay attention not only to what your birds are doing, but to what the wildlife around you is doing. Before this storm, we saw rabbits and squirrels and small birds just in a frantic pace trying to find food and get to cover as fast as possible. Now, when the wildlife's doing that kind of thing, you better pay attention because they know something's coming and they're trying to get ready, so you should be doing it too. Second thing with that is once the storm hits, you might have to go out and get in that storm to make sure your animals are doing okay. And you got to dress appropriately for that, I mean, we've only got a few acres here, but if the wind's blowing hard enough and it's snowing hard enough, it's hard to see where the house is. So, you got to stay warm and keep your bearings about you. Now, when it comes time to feed the birds, you've got a couple of options. And typically with the storms, I'll try to feed them before the storm hits. I will deviate from their normal feeding time. But in the winter, we do like to mix a little more corn into their feed just for warmth. And another option is the soaked feeds. Now, some people like to use soaked feeds because they're partially fermented, and also it provides additional moisture. Now, to be perfectly honest, we try to let the animal instincts on our birds kick in as much as possible in certain situations, and we believe that that helps to breed a more sturdy bird over the generations. So we're not opposed to them eating a little snow here and there if they have to. And when it gets down real cold in temperature, this year we didn't use any soaked feed. I have in the past. You give them fresh water when you can, but that water's going to freeze up in a hurry. And unless you want to be running water out there every few hours, those birds are just going to have to learn to drink as much as they can when they can, and then rely on snow for additional moisture. Now, as far as your pens go, you're going to want to seal up drafts, but also make sure you have ventilation. So, the way I look at it is a draft is anywhere where snow can blow through and create cold spots in the pen, whereas ventilation is something that allows air to flow but doesn't allow snow or rain to blow in. And so they stay dry inside. Staying dry and staying out of the wind are two things that'll help get a bird through most anything. Now, plastic is very useful, especially on smaller pens. You can wrap anything that's wire in plastic, provided that you staple it down well to keep the wind from ripping it off. If you get a lot of snow in a short period of time and you use pens that have wire covers to the top of them, your chicken run's got a wire top to keep hawks and aerial predators out, then you run the risk of the snow load collapsing your pen. So a couple of things you can do there. You can go out before the storm hits and prop it up with additional posts or 2x4s or whatever. You can go out as soon as you notice it's sagging and use a shovel or a rake and push up on the wire repeatedly to shake the snow off. Or if you're in an area with lots of snow load and you've got stationary pens, you might want to just build something that's a little heavier duty and has a solid roof instead, so that you don't have to worry about it. Now with our pheasants, you've seen what we raise our pheasants in, and eventually we are going to do a completely different setup for our breeders. The pens they're in now are more for spring and summer, and eventually I'll probably end up using those for meat chickens instead of the pheasants. But for now, they are where they are. So what I ended up having to do with them, because I can't wrap the whole pen in plastic, is I put in several little huts made out of mineral lick tubs and barrels, stuffed them full of straw, and then covered them in straw on the outside. Now, this is instinctual for a pheasant. If they have a hiding spot in a cornfield or tall grass or some farmer's hay bale pile, that's where they're going to go to hide out and wait for the storm to be over. And I don't know if you've ever seen footage of grouse or ptarmigans in the Arctic Circle, but they're just going to burrow down, let the storm blow, and then dig themselves out of the snow when it's done. Now, the problem is that these birds are in an enclosed area, so if things start drifting too much, they're going to get trapped in there. So we actually came out 3 times yesterday to make sure that they had a spot dug out to where they could escape if they needed to into, more open area in the pen. And we did it again this morning. But other than that, and this is a key thing, don't go messing with your birds. If they're inside of a chicken house or they're hunkered down in the snow, don't flush them out. Don't pull them out of there. Don't open the chicken house doors. Leave it shut. Every time you do open it or dig them out, you're making the bird waste energy by moving. And energy's heat. You are disrupting the heat pocket they've created around themselves. And then you're making them use additional energy to build that heat pocket back up once you leave them alone. Now, chickens maybe don't handle the cold weather as intelligently as pheasants or quail or what have you. So, better off locking them up. Peafowl, I'd absolutely lock those up. When I was a kid, we had a Spalding hen that she was high strung and knocked down the board that we used to lock them in the old barn for the night. And she decided she was going to roost on this tree branch we had in the pen underneath the barn light. Well, we had an ice storm, and when she got off the roost in the morning, she left her legs on the roost. And I've heard of that happening to other people as well. So, rainstorms, ice storms, snowstorms, don't chance it. Just lock them up. And even my hens in my little mobile pens there, I didn't even try to dig out the pens. I just fed them inside the barrel and didn't ask them to come outside of it at all. It's nice and compact. They've got ventilation. They're warm. They're cozy. They can move around. And for a day or two, they'll be just fine. I mean, you got to stop and think. If you've ever seen that video of the barrel colony I made, people will house birds in those barrels individually for extended lengths of time. I'm not talking months here, but, days to weeks. So it's not the end of the world if they're inside that barrel for a few days during a storm. All right. What else can I say, really? It doesn't hurt to have a plan in place either for moving your birds. And this is something that I ran into a problem with this morning with the ducks. So we didn't anticipate any more snowstorms when we set up the duck breeding pens last week. Or was it the week before? I forget. Anyway, we didn't anticipate it. We certainly didn't anticipate this much. So with the direction of the wind and the high volume of snow that we got, those little huts that we put them in were completely snowed under. And while the ducks were fine, we had to dig out a path to get to them, and then a path in front of the duck huts, and then we had to use a crowbar to get the doors open because the blowing snow froze them shut. Once we got them out, though, I made a little ramp so they could get up over the snowdrift and into the rest of their individual runs. And I should have thought of it, and I didn't, but I came out this afternoon to check on everybody, and all but 2 of the breeding pens were empty because those ducks launched themselves off the top of the snow piles and commingled. So now, for the next 3 or 4 weeks, I've got to split all the drakes and hens up again so that I know that I'm not going to hatch off any crossbreds, and I've just cost myself a month of hatching. So that's something you got to keep in mind too. You don't want your animals to be able to just walk up and over the fence if they feel like it, or conversely for predators to do the same. But there's a couple tips for you. I hope it helps. And if you got some tips you want to throw in, mention it in the comments, or if you got something that you'd like me to cover a little more, mention that as well. Thanks for watching. And one of these days, you're going to tune in and we'll actually have grass instead of snow. So, have a good one.